Death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it. Haruki Murakami.
Hello. Welcome.
Just want to say real quick, fantastic intro song, by the way. I'm digging that intro song, so nice
It's
work
a
on
grower.
that one.
It's a grower.
That's a good one. That's a good
All right. So, first off, good to see everyone. Good to be back. We have a very big show tonight. And we have an affiliate now. We have an affiliate. So, we're going to go ahead and get that set up real quick. So, go ahead and check this out.
This episode of This Uncanny Earth is brought to you by Jack and V, the new sci-fi novella experience. Available on Amazon Kindle, May 5th.
All right. You're going to have
Nice.
to check that out. You can pre-order it, right?
Yeah, it's up for pre-order. I actually did so today. It's $3.99.
Yeah. Good
Pre-order
price.
numbers are great for somebody who's an author just getting started. I didn't write it, so people out there being like, "Oh, you're pitching your own stuff." No, it's somebody I've known for a long time. It's their first release, and pre-orders are excellent for Amazon for keeping them in the view. We're gonna have one of those little spots. We only got a couple right now, but as we pick up more affiliates and sponsors and things, we'll add them over the next several weeks. Next week is going to have food involved, and I'm getting hungry already just thinking about it.
All right. So, how are you tonight, Rob?
Oh man, I'm ready to go. I'm lit for this episode. Is that what the kids say? I think
Yeah.
that's what the kids say at this point, lit and all that jazz. Now I'm excited. We got you back in the moderator chair, though. I don't know. I don't know if that was a great idea, but
Gonna have to be careful with that.
you got this. You're gonna do
Yep.
well. Fun fact: that quote you heard at the beginning, I did in less than 5 minutes because
Nice.
I forgot to, and I was like, 10 minutes, I can do it. Did it in 5.
Good
We're
job.
still figuring this out.
That's all
We're
right.
still getting there.
I think what we'll do next time is maybe run the advertisement at the beginning, then the quote, then the show. This way we don't cut out, so it doesn't look
Okay.
too sloppy, gentlemen.
All right.
Anyways, that's
Sounds
just what I thought. And then you out there in Uncanny Land, you get a bit of behind the scenes look at what we do. So stay tuned for some more of that stuff coming your way on the Patreon.
Oh, and you said you missed the live the other day, James. You're fine. It's great. We love
We
it.
only come to your
Love
house
you.
if you miss too many lives in a row,
Yeah.
and we show up at your house.
I honestly, I think that's the first one he's ever missed. So kudos to you, James. Now we're gonna start tonight talking about adipocere, which interesting story of how I came across this term is, well, it's not a very long story. I was listening to music one day and I heard a song called Adipocere and I was like, oh, I dig that. So I decided to look into it. So essentially it's grave wax, but it is the saponification of lipids in the body by bacteria. So like breakdown, like it's when the fats in our body break down by the bacteria. It is most frequently witnessed in humid anaerobic environments such as burials in water-saturated soils. The formation of this tissue can be observed as early as 2 weeks post-mortem, but formation that covers the full cadaver may take several years. Now, have you guys heard about the soap lady?
No, but please tell us more.
All right. So, honestly, I don't really know much about this one, to be completely honest. I kind of found this one at the last minute. But there is apparently a lady completely covered in this grave wax, as they call it, because she passed away. Caught myself there, in a very moist environment, and there was a lot of water, and so that fed the bacteria, which broke the body down and created this grave wax, as they call it, and it basically formed all over her body, and they have it at the Smithsonian. So I'm going to look deeper into that one on my episode on Saturday. But
If you go to the Smithsonian and ask them where the giant skeletons are.
oh, that would be great.
Tell them it's from me. Don't know what it means.
So would either one of you like to say anything about this so far?
Well, actually, it's interesting because it's not the only thing that you can find on the recently or even the long deceased that is a biological process that keeps on going, basically. I don't know if you were going to mention it, so I hope I'm not stealing your thunder.
No, you're not.
But the Vivianite is a mineral that's known sometimes as corpse crystals.
Ooh.
And it's a green, like jade-like looking, like a real deep green, transparent crystal. And they actually, they usually are found inside fossil shells or attached to fossil bone, but it can also appear inside iron coffins or on people's corpses as a result of a chemical reaction of the decomposing body with the iron enclosure. And they're kind of cool looking. I don't want to make the stream do weird things by sending the picture over, but Vivianite, Vivianite, it's pretty cool. I found this out the other day in looking up some of the things that you talked about.
Nice. I'll look
That is a
deeper into
great
that
idea, by
too.
the way, yeah. Some behind the scenes merchandise ideas too, by the way.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna wonder, oh, what are they talking about? Well, you'll find out
You'll find out.
tomorrow.
Mañana.
I'll be back in December tomorrow.
And I've
But
heard.
yeah, that's cool.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I didn't have too much more to say about that.
Okay.
It is cool that things like that can happen, regardless of, because it's not a sterile environment necessarily. It's clean, but it's not like it's a laboratory environment when you put them in their final resting place. I mean, no matter how clean you get, there's going to be bacteria and things that get in there, and kind of cool things happen, despite the fact that you're missing the person that's gone. But still, scientifically,
and one of the
stuff.
One of the things you actually made me think of when you mentioned that was, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that sometimes our hair and nails will keep growing after we pass. Is that?
It's because your body, there's an electro response as your body like loses out the energy that's kept it going for so long.
Yeah.
And certain bodily processes are automatic, and they'll keep on going to a certain point while there's still a certain amount of resting energy in the body before that runs out. Just because the blood isn't flowing and the heart isn't pumping doesn't mean there isn't any sort of energy movement. Eventually that'll stop, but the various things like that can happen, and it'll it's a weird sensation if they ever need to re-exhume somebody for either a court case or just for different reasons. But it can happen.
All right, so continuing on, it was originally believed to occur only in aqueous environments, but it is now understood that there is sufficient water within the body for the saturated fatty acids to hydrogenate and hydrolyze into adipocere, where the release of fatty acids limits the decomposition and inhibits bacterial growth. When fresh adipocere is characterized by the smell of ammonia and a soft, wet, greasy appearance. So if you've ever seen like dried food grease, that's kind of like a very similar consistency.
You skipped somebody, by the way.
Hey, I have a question,
sorry.
Teacher, I have my hand up.
Sorry,
I have my
Rob.
hand up to talk.
He gets excited. He just wants to talk.
He does. So I think it's one thing I wanted to say, and then it'll be quick. 2 hours later. It very much sounds like residue from energy burn off. When the soul is leaving the body, it goes through a process to leave the body. And since energy is never destroyed,
Yes.
it's very interesting
Ooh,
that energy
like
moves
that.
on. And this is the byproduct, much like, when you burn gasoline, right, out of the mufflers is going to end up getting, black
That's
at
cool.
some point.
So you're saying
Because
it's
of
like
that residual energy burn off, and like Spider said to his point about hair and nails, that residual energy continues to dissipate at a certain amount per whatever you want to do, hour, year, whatever, until decomposition has fully happened. So it's like a runoff energy, and this is why a lot of people that claim to see ghosts and things of that nature, that is what they're finding: residual burn off energy from the life before.
I like it. So
Thank you.
you're basically saying that the soul
Yes.
is running off, like that's what powers our body, like gas powers cars, and when it passes on, it leaves the residue, which is the grave wax,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes. That's just one byproduct.
Yeah.
The other byproduct being long hair, nails. Obviously,
And the crystals.
Obviously, you also void all bodily
yeah.
functions. So there
Void
is
their
also that.
bowels.
Yes.
Mhm.
So,
Yep. All right. So sorry, I forgot about you, Rob.
oh no, it's fine. I'm just
Okay.
over here like, hey, teach, I got something to say.
Don't let it happen again.
Okay. So over
Knuckles?
time, it dries out, forming a gray or white crumbly appearance, hence the name grave wax. In anaerobic environments, I know I'm going to butcher this science, but I'm going to try. Clostridium perfringens produces...
You shouldn't say that on stream. You shouldn't say that on stream.
That's inappropriate.
It's inappropriate.
Produces lecithinase, which, along with warm temperatures, facilitates the development of adipocere. The optimum conditions for the catalytic enzymes are mildly alkaline pH and between 22 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius. Generally, adipocere is more commonly found on juvenile or female remains due to the elevated levels of subcutaneous fat in these body types. However, adipocere is not restricted to forming solely in locations with elevated fat content. Hence, there is evidence of saponification occurring within organs and other tissues where fat has diffused to. This translocation occurs because fats liquefy as they are catabolized.
Cannibalized?
Catabolized. Like,
Catabolized?
yeah, let's go with that. Catabolized. I like that.
If it's wrong, let me know in the comments.
Adipocere will eventually degrade once exposed to aerobic conditions, but this process is very slow. So essentially, it will disappear eventually, but it disappears very slowly. And I would like to ask you guys, because I found this out at the last minute, and I don't really know much about it. I'm going to look into it deeper on Saturday. I have heard that adipocere is used in making candles. Do either one of you know anything about that?
It's wax.
Yeah.
I don't listen. I've never heard of this. When
Okay.
you said it to me and I read about it, I didn't know about this beforehand.
I didn't either.
I know the human race, so I'm willing to bet further into the it's probably true category.
Yeah.
Then it's probably false. Like if I know that is a waxy substance, right, that comes out of humans,
touch the candle.
People are going to do that. People are going to, because they'll look at it like, oh, I'm honoring my ancestors, or I'm sending their spirit up to the next life, or I'm doing something that venerates them. Or on the flip side of that, if you practice some occult type of magic, you might need that to do something in terms of contacting a spirit or an entity or a blessing or even a curse. I don't know how human corpse wax works. It's not my
not your forte.
It's not my medium for art.
Yeah. Okay, so next, anything else? Any final comments?
Well, I was just gonna throw in. It's not unheard of for people of a, kind of weirdness in the brain to make candles and things out of human fat, whether it's the kind that you're talking about or
Yeah.
just ending somebody and harvesting it. That's something that has happened in history. It's not like a common thing. Like, it's not mass produced that way, but you've gotten serial killers who've done that. You've had, different cultures have like, there are cannibalistic cultures that's one of the things they do. They do harvest some of the fats for that. They don't always consume all of it. It was part of the movie Fight Club, I believe, when the big guy passed. Didn't they use him for soap? I think.
Ooh.
I don't know. It was
Like-
all in that dude's mind.
Yeah, but I mean, still, they, so
Meatloaf?
it was popularized in a couple because they were making soap out of the
Yeah.
lard and stuff. And I think when the
Yeah.
guy, they were like,
Meatloaf.
"We'll honor him by doing." No, he was in that other movie with the other dancing people.
No, he was in that movie too. That was the big guy that they beat
Oh,
up.
was it really?
Meatloaf. Yeah, it was Meatloaf.
So, yeah, it is a thing that could potentially happen, whether it's, again, related to the kind that you're talking about as a natural process or just somebody coming along and taking it from within the body. Not common, but it has been known to happen.
Yeah, I've
Quick-
heard about that. Go ahead.
Quick thought. What if that's ectoplasm?
Ooh, interesting.
Hmm.
Because they do say
Like-
it's like a similar consistency, right?
It's not so much that, but if you're doing seances and stuff, and ectoplasm was a big thing back in the day for people to get covered in.
Yeah.
What better thing to get covered in than human fat waste?
Ooh, interesting.
Anyways, that was my 2 cents.
And I need to correct myself on the soap lady from earlier. My ADHD kicked in, and I had to.
You
look it
really
up.
need to come clean about it.
Yes, I do. I had the wrong museum. It was not the Smithsonian. It is called the Mutter Museum of the College of Physicians of Philadelphia. And it has a little blurb about it right here on the site. Real quick. The soap lady is the name given to a woman whose body was exhumed in Philadelphia in 1875. The specimen is unique because a fatty substance called adipocere encases the remains. Adipocere formation is not common, but it may form in alkaline, warm, airless environments, such as the one in which the soap lady was buried. So that
it's
one
kind of like, not to interrupt, but it's kind
Yeah.
of like the same sort of circumstances as the crystals. They grow specifically in environments where there's iron nearby as a chemical reaction with things in the body. So
yes.
interesting.
And I was done, so you weren't interrupting. Rob?
Real quick. I wonder if over a span of time, given that environment, if that crystal hardens and then forms into a rock, and then if the things that look like people that you would see in different places, I wonder if they are people. And then let's take this a step further. And what if the things that look like giants are giants? Because it's given to reason that when giants pass, their bodies would do something similar.
I dig it. I like it.
Dig it.
Because it's like the calcification of the bones, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, natural process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All
here
you
we
need
go.
is the right chemical.
Hey, Lighthouse, welcome.
And now we are going over to one of Rob's favorite topics, Egypt with mummification. So what we got for this, mummification is the process of preserving a dead body, typically through drying or embalming to prevent decay, and it can occur naturally in dry, hot, or cold environments, or be intentionally done through various methods like removing moisture, using chemicals, or wrapping the body. And now they started talking about these environments right here is I heard that in ancient Egypt, a lot of times they would actually start to bury their deceased under the sand to dry them out, and it would preserve the bodies better. But then over time, they started to think about it, and they were like, hey, we're basically putting our people in the ground and just letting all this sand cover them up. That's kind of disrespectful. So then they started putting them in coffins, kind of like we do now. But then the sand wasn't preserving the bodies as well. So they're like, hey, what are we going to do about this? How do we fix this? So their solution was to take each individual organ out of the body and wrap it up all by itself in its own little cocoon, essentially. And they would put them in jars. Now, Rob, since this is one of your favorite topics, but what do you have to add so far?
So the first thing I want to say is the organ harvesting in Egypt to do that was only if you were of a certain class and had a certain amount of money. The poorest level of mummification was they just voided your bowels. They didn't take your organs out. They didn't do nothing like that.
Yeah.
And then they put you in like a salt and dried you out, wrapped you up, and then they gave you back to your family. They wouldn't, you don't get buried in a pyramid, or because there were none found in a pyramid. You don't get buried in the tomb of the kings or anything of that nature. You don't get anything. You don't get an edifice to your magnificence. You're just a pauper, so your family can decide what to do with you. That to me was the most interesting part, and it makes sense because not everybody had a bunch of money, and that's a process. And I'm sure for the time, those people probably charged quite a pretty penny.
Yeah.
Because in some cultures, death rituals are handled by a certain class of people. In India, the people who handle the dead are looked upon as like not filth, but like unclean almost. The Japanese were the same way. So they're just part and parcel to all of that. I'm going far away from the topic. But also with Egypt, mummification happened, and then other things were left around the mummy for his passage into the afterlife. So, like the coins to pay Charon, the ferryman, to cross the river Styx. That's why we used to put quarters in the eyes of the dead, so they would have passage to the other side. I think mummification is a very interesting topic, especially dealing with Egypt, because as we know, our good buddy over there that we all love, the Minister of Antiquities, I'm sure would let us know all about mummies. But I think there's more to be uncovered in Egypt. And I'll say this until my dying breath. There's something else there. I think after last week's episode about what was underneath those pyramids, or the week before that, sorry. That right there showed me that there's something else going on. Not a whole underwater or under the sand alien civilization like we saw with Spider's one picture, but I do think that it's almost like it raised the pyramid up, to deal with the flood, whatever. That's my thoughts on Egypt and mummies.
All right.
Sorry,
So,
I went on a tangent.
no, actually, I like that. Real quick before we go ask Spider about the stuff they found under the pyramids, going back to that for a second. I think it's really interesting because I've actually tried talking with people about that in real life, and a lot of people are like, oh, they couldn't scan that far. Didn't you see? They debunked it. And I'm like, okay, but even if they did debunk it, why are they so stingy about getting information out? Why don't they want anyone to see it? What are they trying to hide? Even if it's not a whole city or whatever, there's still something they're trying to hide. Now, Spider, what do you think about mummification?
Well, the thing about mummification, especially in Egypt, it became a cultural part, like a focus of their culture over time. It wasn't necessarily something that they started with. It had the early beginnings, kind of the way that you described it, in that they initially buried them one way, and then when they buried them another way, they still wanted to preserve them. As their culture advanced and they became more spiritual and more religious, they became more involved in the process, and it became more than what it initially was. And so when that happened, it became put on a bit of a pedestal because, again, it was reserved more towards mostly royalty, but also people mostly of noble birth or very rich merchants. Anybody who could afford it, basically, that wasn't royalty was also included in there. But the poorer folks saw mummification as this is a thing that they do to get closer to our deities, to get closer to the divine. So we want to have that for our people too, but we can't get the chemicals, we can't get this, because we're poor. So they would do half and half. They would temporarily cover the body in sand for a certain amount of time to dry it out, kind of like the old way, but it wasn't in a deep way. It was just like a shallow space that they could easily get them out, and then they would wrap them or find somebody to wrap them afterwards, because the wrapping part was the cheapest part, because you could get the linen wasn't necessarily expensive on its own. You could get more expensive linen, but they would just be like, hey, no, wrap it up. It's doing the organs, it's the specific substances that they use to make it more fragrant and not smell like a body. And those things that drove the cost up by quite a bit, because those were harder to find, those were rare. So the poor people would still be like, hey, you know what? Uncle Bob, he's kicked the bucket, but we still want him to go see the gods when he's gone. We don't want to just bury him. So put him in the sand for a little while, dry him out, preserve him as best you can, find somebody who will wrap him for cheap, and then you've got yourself a family member who's got a little bit more respect than you might have otherwise. And then you just have to find a spot to intern him, which is a whole other thing, because of course you had the Valley of the Kings for the nobles, you had the pyramids, if you go by that theory, but the poorer people didn't have that, so they still had to find burial plots and things like that, and that could kind of get the price up. But Egyptian funeral rites were all over the place, because you also had the professional mourners that you could buy or rent, rather, to follow along while you memes. Went to bury him, and people would be like, oh, Uncle Bob, he was so great in the community, we miss him so much, oh my gosh. And the more you spent, the better they were, instead of hey, it's Uncle Bob, he just kicked the bucket, we're gonna miss him, see you later, Bob. Hey. And then but it became a big deal for them as the time went on, mostly because of the focus on mummification being a preservation for the way for them to meet in the afterlife their gods and become part of something greater than what they were. So it really detailed a shift in all of Egyptian culture from that point on, and it never really went back.
Yeah. My question for Spider is, when did New Jersey invade Egypt? That's that's the quintessential question. You're like, hey, what are you doing? I'm building a pyramid.
I'll do it for $5. Hey,
the pyramid was built by the mob. The pyramid was built by the mob.
You have to outsource sometimes.
Yeah, the mob was popular back then. No, my question would be that the more we dig into this, I guess it's not a question, it's more of a statement. I think the more we dig into this, I think we're going to unwrap some very interesting things about history, especially about body preservation. I think that would be fantastic, actually. This way you can kind of do somewhat DNA research if you can, if our good buddy lets you do it, which he probably will not, even though he'll have somebody probably on his team do it so that he can have a big notebook full of secrets. And probably our faces in it, and he just puts X's over them like, these are bad guys. All they do is talk about me on their show. In, obviously, Arabic, because, obviously.
All right, so I think this might be the part where I get fired. So there was something that Spider said a second ago.
Here we go.
He mentioned professional mourners, and it reminded me of something. So I would like to share this very quickly. Can everyone see this? Do you want to boost your funeral? Hire me, the professional mourner, to come and cry at the funeral. Below are the summer special prices. Normal crying for $50. Bahamian hollering for $100. Crying and rolling on the ground for $150. Crying and threatening to jump into the grave, $200. Crying and actually jumping into the grave, $1,000.
I also want to say it reminds the professional mourners almost remind me of if you guys ever get to go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, You can hire an actual band. You go downtown to the city office and you get a permit for a band, and a band will come and follow you around and play music while you were drinking or just walking around town. Listen, this is something we are going to do for one of our Uncanny trips. How fire would that be?
Yes.
Walking around Baton Rouge where they're like, I'm sorry, New Orleans.
I've seen them do that on cartoons. I thought that was fake. You're telling me
No.
that's real?
I looked into it.
Oh,
I
no.
actually looked into seeing if I can hire a parade to
Oh,
follow me around as I would bar hop. Of course, we're all going to
Wow.
go.
I
That
love
would
it.
be amazing.
Yes. That
It's
does
all
sound amazing.
connected to the same thing. I mean, the meme looks like it's funny,
Yeah.
but that's actually pretty close to the kind of stuff that they did.
Yes.
The more that you
Yes.
spent on the mourners, the more
Yes.
they'd be into it. They
Yes.
would
That's great.
they would if you paid
Yes.
them enough, and these are from not first-hand accounts necessarily, but historical sources that are pretty
Yeah.
well regarded. You could pay them a certain amount and they'd tear at their clothes and they'd
Yep.
beat themselves up and pull their hair and things, and they'd just be so upset. And
I could get into
it's
that
just a
business.
thing. Like, if you wanted the world to know that this guy it's so awful that he's gone and nobody's ever going to see a guy like this ever again, and you better wish that you live as good as this guy. You spend a lot on a mourner,
Yeah.
and they'll
Listen.
tell everybody.
I'll talk him up. I'll say we
He
were
was
best
such a good
friends. He saved me
person.
from a fire when I was an orphan. I
He
went to
took me to
medical
the
school
hospital when
because
I
of him.
was having a kidney stone.
Okay,
He
let's
was
get back to this.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, let's get back to what we're supposed
But
to
yeah,
be
it's
talking
a thing that happened. So
about. Yeah.
it's a thing.
All right, so the most well-known example of artificial mummification is the practice of the ancient Egyptians, who meticulously preserved the bodies for the afterlife. And we already talked about how they removed the organs. They also dried the body with the sand, and the wrapping and preservation of the linen. We talked about that. Now, there have also been mummification practices found in the Andes, where they were preserved in cold, dry mountain environments.
Mhm.
In China, the practice of mummification involves specific burial rituals and practices, which we will be getting to in just a few minutes. And in other cultures, including those in Europe, they have also practiced mummification in various forms. So it's not, so basically what we're trying to get at here is it's not specifically like an Egyptian thing. And if you really think about it, we've actually gotten kind of closer to the ancient Egyptian way because we embalm our bodies and, you know, try to make them smell nice. So it's still kind of around in a new form, like a modern form.
They do take the organs out of a lot of times too. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times you think just for autopsies and whatnot, but depending on some things, like if they were an organ donor or whatever. But a lot of times, some funeral places will take everything out because otherwise the body's going to bloat and do things that they do naturally as the processes run their course. So while we don't preserve them in the jars and venerate them and things like that, it's still something that medically was something that the Egyptians were ahead of their time as far as the idea to do this kind of stuff. It's just they didn't see it necessarily as a medical thing. They saw it as a spiritual thing, but it is a practice that we continue.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we move on? All right. Next up, we're going to talk about an Eastern form of mummification called Shokushinbutsu. Now, this was a process of self-mummification while still alive, which was practiced by Tibetan monks. You give up food and water until you starve to death and become a mummy. Sounds like a fun way to go. Between the 11th and 20th century, hundreds of monks have attempted the process of Shokushinbutsu. However, only 24 were ever successful. And out of those 24, 17 are available for public viewing in the Yamagata prefecture. Its literal translation is essentially to becoming a Buddha in this body, and they are trying to attain Buddhahood at a faster rate than through external meditation. This was practiced by a mountain-dwelling sect of monks known as Shugendo, and they would force themselves onto a strict diet with rigorous exercise before sealing themselves within a tomb while still alive. So let's take a break there. Rob, do you think you would ever do this to yourself?
Listen, y'all know me. You know that's not going to happen. I actually looked into this too because I thought it was very interesting. And for me, the interesting part about a lot of it is they eat mountain food.
Yeah,
So,
pine
like,
needles, nuts,
tree bark,
berries,
pine
Yes.
needles, nuts and berries.
literal tree bark.
Yes, like
Yep.
little bark. And then what they do is they just stop consuming liquids altogether. So they're
And they
not
work
claiming
out a
any
lot.
fluids. I bet their lips are dry and chapped as could be. Mm,
And Spider, what do you think about this?
spiders do.
It's
Yeah, are you?
nah, Blaze of Glory. It's dedication. It is some dedication.
Yeah.
Like I can understand somebody being so committed to something, but it wouldn't be something that I'd be particularly interested in
Yeah.
because I like to eat too much.
Same.
And so
And you like your fluids.
I do. I like my fluids. I'm enjoying my fluids right now.
You're probably more
Um,
pickled than mummified, to be honest.
Hey,
Oh,
that's the way to that's the way to go. See,
there's
that's
an
more back to the
experiment.
Egyptian stuff. See,
There's an
um,
experiment.
but yeah, it is dedication and the mindset of somebody to be that dedicated to a cause or to an ideal or something, to be like, you know what, this is how I'm gonna go, and I'm just gonna do that. And you have to wonder, because once they seal themselves in, you don't really hear stories of them being like, I changed my mind, I'm ready to come out. You don't hear that, and that's maybe because it doesn't happen, which is again super dedicated, or maybe because they're already locked in there and nobody's going to bother checking out. So,
Well,
you
they
could
were
go a
supposed-
couple different ways with it to see if somebody lost their nerve at the last minute, and oh, too late, buddy. We put the last brick in. You're going through. So
I think too, with not having any food or water and just putting yourself into such a deep trance,
you might fall
because
asleep.
this is medically been proven that people can dip into their subconscious or their,
Mhm.
and once you get into your subconscious, you can literally break your brain if you delve too far deep into something. And a lot of people are like, that's not true, but
Oh,
it
no.
is.
They've got
Um,
scientific evidence.
But the sheer will of that is fascinating because they probably don't even think about food, because what they're doing is they're chanting sutras. So they're aligning spirit, they're aligning their chakras, so to speak. They're aligning themselves to a point where they don't feel pain. They don't feel the hunger pangs that you would feel not eating. They don't realize that their skin is just basically stuck to their bones and you see their ribs. They don't feel pain, and they're chanting these sutras. And I think they get so deep into whatever realm of their head that they can get into that nothing else is around them. They get in such deep meditative trances that nothing else is around. And at that point, they just let their body shut down. So it's like a peaceful transition to the next life.
I could see that. And getting back to what Spider said a second ago about people just forgetting to check up on them, technically part of the process is they're supposed to check on the body after a certain period of time and see how well it was preserved to see whether or not they were successful, which is why only 24 of them were actually successful.
Oh.
So I'm going to get to that here in just a second. So as I said earlier, you can actually find 17 of them are available for public viewing in Japan in the Yamagata Prefecture. I got to look into that. I got to see those in Japan. The actual process started off with 100 days of a special diet of only nuts and seeds, while also doing intense exercise to shred their body fat off. There was an alternative diet called Moku Jikigyo, where the monks would forage and survive only on tree roots, nuts and berries, tree bark, and pine needles, and sometimes even river rocks. That's what Rob was talking about a minute ago. Yeah, they actually found river rocks in some of these people's stomachs. And this diet of mokujikigyo translates to eating a tree.
Yeah.
So, Rob, I know you like to eat your healthy food. Do you think you would at least do the diet? You think you could do the eating a tree diet?
No, because you for as many calories as you have to burn per day, you need to be able to back that up with the energy to do it. And yeah, I can't. I'm sorry. The pine needles alone, like I get what they do with the pine needles, right? It's not like they just pick them up and start chucking them down by the handful, though they
That's
might.
what I was thinking.
But I think they boil it or they do something to
Oh,
it where they can eat
okay.
it.
Maybe like a soup.
Maybe like a soup. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, just hey Jim, how much of this pine noodle soup you eating today? Not too much, but I'm filled on tree bark from earlier, so just give me a smidge. Or they might have made tea out of it too. So that could have been another thing.
That could have been the thing.
Because the sap, if there's any sap to it, would just probably stick in their stomach. I don't know. This isn't a diet for me. I like to diet, but in the right way. Fruits, vegetables, low fat meats, things like that. Not the roots and the grass and the trees. I don't. Sorry, guys. I'm not gonna self mummificate.
What about you, Spider? Could you do it for the lactose intolerance?
He could do it. He's gonna do it. If you guys donate $100,000 to our Patreon, he will do it. He'll do it.
I'll be spending that money. When you look at it, if you think about the rocks and things like that, you start thinking, well, why would they bother? Because obviously they're not going to get any nutritional value.
Yeah,
but that's the point. It is. Yeah. It's just supposed to make you so you don't feel full. It's tricking the brain again. It's all about that willpower, all about that mind over matter thing. The more you can trick your body into not bothering you with, I'm hungry, feed me, the closer you can get to your spiritual end that you've chosen. So they do all these things to fool them, their physical self, into feeling like, yeah, we've got food in here. We don't got to worry about it. We're all good. While slowly, every bit of them is just wasting away and drying out on purpose. And it's just like, it's the kind of thing that happens with any actual diet that you don't know what you're doing on. If you just are like, hey, I need to lose some weight, I'm just going to go on this whatever diet, and you look it up, you're like, I'm just going to eat all these. Your body isn't ready to just do that. It might not get nutritional value immediately from such an extreme shift in food choices.
Yeah.
Especially as you get older. As you get older, your body relies on certain ingredients and certain minerals and vitamins from certain sources more often than not. If you've spent your entire life eating certain quantities of meats and things like that, and then when you're 75 you decide, oh no, I'm going to go on an all vegan diet, it's probably going to wreck you a little bit, because your body's so used to eating the other way, getting the proteins the other way. Whereas on the other hand, if you start really, really young and you're like, I'm just going to eat all vegan or vegetarian or whatever, and then and then if you get into like 65, 70, that kind of thing, and you said, oh, you know what? Now I'm going to start eating cheeseburgers and everything. You're going to wreck your body because it's not used to that. And you can cause yourself really physical harm and eventually expire from that kind of thing, from like a form of toxic shock almost, because you're just...
almost like a drug.
And it fools your body and thinking, oh yeah, I'm full now, but I've got all these other things that are going bad now, and you might not notice, but you're tearing yourself up. So you got to watch, as you, depending on where you are in your life, what kind of diets and things that you're doing, and you have to be gradual. You can't just shift to an extreme from one or the other. You have to just phase foods in and phase them out as time goes on, and it'll work out better that way. But if you don't, you're going to end up maybe self-mummifying.
I think you only self-mummify if you do the tree bark diet, but I think
you're dried out too. I mean, that's the other
It'd be
thing.
like food poisoning.
No.
The less liquids you have.
Yeah, because you're not going to be poisoned from the food. The food poisonings where you're throwing up or you're doing the other thing, and it's fierce. This is just your body's moisture is just evaporating slowly over time.
Going to the bathroom relies heavily on fluids.
Yeah.
Like regardless of whether it's solid or not, it's all like the fluids is what's causing all that stuff to happen. It's compacting if it's one, and if it's not, it's the other. So if you deny your body most of these fluids, you just build up all these things in your stomach,
Mhm.
and your stomach won't really get rid of it.
Yeah. So they call it the tree diet because you're basically eating trees.
Yes. Bark, roots,
Yeah.
pine needles.
So real quick, you guys
Mhm.
cool with going over an hour tonight?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So the idea was to prepare the body by eliminating any fat and muscle from the frame while also preventing future decomposition by depriving the body's natural bacteria of vital nutrients and moisture. So probably not going to get much adipocere on any of these bodies.
What do they pass away from?
They pass away from starvation.
Okay. But they don't know. I want to be able to measure that point right when they're about to
When
fade,
Yeah.
just to see what happens, like what part of them is fading, because there's got to be a point to where they just stop talking completely. They don't talk anymore
Yeah.
because they're already cracked, dry lips have chapped together. So I can't.
That'd be
Yeah.
interesting.
No, but yeah.
So on the more spiritual side of things, the constant isolated quest for food would harden the monk's morale to discipline him while also encouraging contemplation. I'm guessing, make them think about life and, stuff like that. Monks would also drink a tea brewed from urushi to begin the embalming process, since it would render their bodies toxic to insects and maggots. So that way, after they pass away, the insects aren't trying to eat them. Do either one of you know how long that takes before the insects start eating the bodies?
Well, we embalm bodies, and the casket has to rot first, I think, for the maggots, but
So,
I don't know how that works.
A pretty long
I'm not
time,
100% sure
most
how that
likely.
works.
What
Now, old days, depending on the temperature, relatively fast, depending on your temperature. And if they buried them or not. Sorry.
What is this rushi made out of? Is it a mushroom?
Yeah, that's what I
or
want to
is
know
it-
too.
I think it's a tree root, is my understanding.
How's it spelled? I'll do a quick look up because that's
URUSHI.
key point, I think.
URUSHI.
It's a Pokemon.
Sounds about like one.
Okay, it's the sap of the lacquer tree that's transformed into a versatile and durable material for Japanese crafts. So
told you, told you.
It's a preservative, but
I
not
wonder
for food particularly.
Yeah.
It's like a lacquering for you're staining your deck and things.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if it seals up your waste management system.
Ooh, that might be painful.
Well, no, because if they're already at that point,
Ah,
and they don't have any more, as nobody said, pee or poo inside of them, then that would just waxy build, seal up those orifices so that no waste, if left over, can escape.
Yeah. So, as the end approached, the monks would then rest in a small pine box, which his fellow monks would lower into the ground about 10 feet below the earth with a bamboo rod as an airway for breathing. They would then cover the box with charcoal and leave the monk with a small bell to let them know he was still alive. And for days, the monk would meditate in total darkness and ring the bell. So the bell was basically like his lifeline. Like when you're in the hospital and you hear the beep, beep, that was the bell. So when the ringing stopped, the above-ground monks would assume the monk underground had died and would proceed to seal the tomb, where they would leave the corpse to lie for another 1,000 days. So they seal it up and let it go for 1,000 days. So it wasn't. For some reason, I was thinking it was 10 because I'm not good with numbers. But after waiting these 1,000 days, they would open the tomb. This is the part I was telling you about earlier when Spider was asking if anyone would check on him. And they would open the tomb to check if the monk had been successfully mummified. And if he had been mummified, then he was immediately seen as a Buddha and put in the temple for viewing. If they had failed the process and their body showed decomposition, they were sealed back within their tomb and cherished for the sacrifice they made. What I want to know, though, is why go through this? Well, apparently they saw this as a transcendence rather than the end. So in their minds, they believed it to be a worthy cause, since it would grant them access to heaven, where they would live for 1,000,000 years and be able to protect humanity. So what do you guys think about that so far? Rob?
So
That's basically the end of it.
this religion as a whole is older than we are. They understand things on that side of the world that we do not understand, right? So their concept of death is far from our concept of death. You know, they don't have a bunch of mourners, bless you. They don't have a bunch of mourners. They don't have a bunch of people, you know, dancing and things like that. It's just a very quiet. They pass away.
I like that.
They're revered if they win or if they lose, so to speak. So I don't know. It's not something I could personally do because, you know, it's just, that's not me. That's not my culture. That's not what I was raised as. That's not who I am as a person. But I respect it. I think it's a very interesting study into how powerful the mind could be. You know, you are literally devoting all of your energy into becoming a mummy. So that point, I just want to see the point when they pass. There's got to be a small,
Put a camera in there.
they would, you know, could you imagine us doing that as American tourists? What's up, guys?
Turn
Today
it
we're
into
gonna
a
see if
reality
this
show.
mummy dude is actually gone or still duding. What's up, mummy dude? What are you doing? Taking selfies with it and stuff. Yeah, no.
Don't give people ideas. I could see that becoming a real show. I don't want to.
I don't either. And then we'll sue them because we thought of it first. So yeah, play around. FAAFO.
FAFO.
FAFO.
Yep.
Yeah. So not for me, but I respect it as a cultural tradition and as an interesting way to an interesting study on the mental ability of a human being without worldly pleasures affecting it.
And Spider?
The willpower aspect is really impressive. I mean, I consider myself a highly willful person. I think a lot of people who know me will be like, well, yeah, he'll stick to it.
Can't go more than 3 days without food, though.
Well, because I like to eat. I mean, if I was going on like a hunger strike or something like that, if I had it in my head that, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, I'm sure I could. But would I really want to go all the way through that entire process and then eat rocks and stuff like that? You know,
Literally.
you have to be really dedicated to the idea that this is going to be a positive outcome for you. And I don't have that much attachment to that kind of spirituality. The way I look at it's a lot different than that. And I just, for me, it's not a matter of willpower. It's more a matter of, I don't see that as helpful towards me in my passing in the future. I don't think making myself more uncomfortable for a certain amount of time is going to be helpful towards when I'm done. So, but I do have to, I do have to say it is impressive. It is very impressive. And some people still, very rarely, you'll still hear a story that somebody has done this kind of thing. Usually an older person from an Eastern culture, they'll shut themselves away and they'll be like, no, I didn't want to be a burden on my family anymore. I didn't want to, you know, and they'll basically do this same process. They just don't have anybody to put them in a tomb at the time.
Yeah.
And so it's not quite the same. You can't take them and put them on display afterwards, one, for respect, of course, and two, because it's not going to be as well preserved. But people still get the idea that, you know what, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do.
Yep.
So I have to give up. I have to say it's impressive.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed for cultural things. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, one of the comments in the chat, nobody really said fasting from food isn't that hard after a few days, and I can vouch for that. my personal record was 3 days back in high school.
My personal record is 5 minutes. Woo!
But yeah, so to end it real quick, the Shokushinbutsu segment. This practice was eventually outlawed by the government in Japan in the 19th century, though people apparently still practiced into the 20th century regardless. The people who practiced this didn't view it as negative, but rather as a sacred process meant to better the world and themselves. And there is no known active sect practicing Shokushinbutsu, and the last known death was in 1903 and was done illegally. His name was Bukai, and he was interred successfully, and he was supposed to be dug up 3 years later, but it was illegal at that point, so he had to wait until 1961 when he was finally dug up by a team of researchers who found him to be, quite well preserved.
I want to say real quick before we jump to the next one.
Yeah.
It is actually thought that Shingon school founder Kukai brought that practice from Tang, China, as part of a secret tantric practice. So if he brought it from China, who knows if that practice still goes on in China?
Yeah.
Because China's a large country, and there's a lot of Buddhist monks, that dwell there. So who knows if this still goes on there?
Yeah.
And also some people, to get into little pop culture here, Vladimir Lenin, Jeremy Bentham, and Mile of Leuchtenberg are a few people who were mummified. Countries like Lebanon, Libya, the United States, and even Australia have all found mummies in it. And Catholics actually mummify stuff because they have some of the bodies of saints, and they're naturally conserved and venerated. So just some real quick stuff for Chet. They can chew on that.
Nice. Spider, anything else before we move on from you?
I know you're going to be going to the big one that you're really excited about now.
Yep.
I'm just going to mention a couple other little minor ones that you might not have thought of. There are a couple things that people can do nowadays. Not that I'm endorsing things for people who are like, "Oh yeah, I'm
here we go
tomorrow."
we were doing so well to get this channel off the ground, and now we're about to get sued. Nice work. Do not try anything he says at home.
Well, no, not do your stuff to yourself. This is for arrangements for after you've already passed. This is
for a rainy day.
Don't do it yourself, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
But we're not doing a Dr. K thing here.
Hey, you could have stopped earlier, but you chose.
That's why I'm not saying the whole thing. We're not endorsing that.
In a van. Down by the river.
But some people are doing the tree pod burial thing.
Yeah, I saw
nowadays.
I was thinking about that.
Specifically, somebody in my household, that's how she wants to be done afterwards. She wants to be in the tree pod. She wants to grow a tree. I don't know the logistics of that. I've never thought about it. I guess I'll have to in the near future at some point. But hopefully not the near future. But that got morbid.
You planning something?
Yeah, right. It's the cops are gonna be like, "That's the episode, boys. That's the episode. Get him."
But
get him.
There's companies now in both here and in Europe where you can make arrangements where instead of being transported to be put into the ground, you get put into this pod that a tree is going to grow out of.
Yeah.
And so you're helping a tree grow and you're helping nature.
Yeah, I love that.
She wants to do that.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
Me, just wrap me up in newspaper and throw me in a hole in the ground because
I want them to taxiderm me, put me in like a candy store, and there's a string on my back, and kids pull it and like say cool sayings, like "Stay in school, kids."
I ain't gonna visit you.
Slappy.
I ain't gonna visit you.
You'll be dead too. They'll put it side by side.
But yeah, so there's just some interesting other ways that people choose afterwards to have things push them off into whatever they're going to next.
Yeah.
Lighthouse says he's happy just to go in a usual wooden box. No, I want to be displayed. You go into your local comic shop. Who's that? Oh, that's Rob. He's deceased. Pull the string on the back, and he says cool sayings. Wouldn't it be kind of... No. Anyways, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. So before we continue, I would like to real quick actually speak about some of my own thoughts on the death rituals. So I personally, this is gonna sound real crazy, but I mean
No,
I
not
am.
from you. There's no way
Yeah,
that will sound like
I
that
am
from
real crazy
you.
though. So we're used to that. But scientifically,
Mm.
in science, if you believe in that stuff, there's this thing known as the law of conservation of mass. I believe that's what it's called. And it simply states that energy is neither created nor destroyed. Matter is neither created nor destroyed. Not energy, sorry, I misspoke. Matter is neither created nor destroyed. Meaning that when we pass on, we're literally passing on. We're in a vessel right now. You know, if you believe in souls, then our soul is in our body powering this. And when we pass on, the soul leaves the body and goes out in somewhere, you know, whatever you believe. But the way I look at it is science says that matter is neither created or destroyed. So either I'm immortal or I don't matter. This is the part where I'm
You
fired.
you used all that time to talk and didn't say anything.
No, I'm saying because yes, I did use it as a lame joke. I admit that, but
We know.
I
We know.
intended I did have a point though, because if you truly believe that matter is neither created nor destroyed, then when we pass on, we are changing from one form to another, but we are still existing
Yes, of
somehow.
course. Of course.
That's all I was trying to say.
No, it's a very valid point.
No,
I
well,
think.
matter is energy,
Yeah,
and energy is what it is. Like it's theorized that all the energy that exists in the universe right now has always existed in the universe right now, and will always exist in the universe right now, even if it's
don't
not
get
doing
me
anything.
started on another tangent.
So
Yeah, let's not get them on tangent time.
but yeah, it when you look at it from that aspect, you can take it from the purely scientific to all sorts of other spiritual or religious
We could do a whole
outlooks,
episode on
and
that.
you could
Yeah.
basically validate a lot of that other stuff. But as Lighthouse points out, we're as far as we're aware, the consciousness
Mhm.
isn't there anymore. So whether the energy is still you or not is an entirely different question, and that's really one of the
That's a
big
good one.
important gaps between the scientific and the spiritual. Is when you're done, your energy is out, it's going on to something else.
Yeah.
What part, if any of it, is still going to carry part of you, and what part's going to become something else? And so, again, that's something that I don't think scientifically we're ever going to come to a consensus on with religion and spirituality. So, if you're going to be a religious or spiritual person, you might as well and just look at it the way that you want to
Yeah.
look at it, because nobody can prove it's not, and you can't really prove it otherwise. So, whatever makes you feel better about the entire process.
All right. So a few things. James, good night. Have a good night. Thanks for coming to hang out with us. And nobody really actually looked it up for us and says the statement energy is neither created nor destroyed is a fundamental principle in physics known as the law of conservation of energy. This means that energy can be transferred from one form to another, copied from Google. And that is the one that I was talking about a second ago.
Mm.
So now we're going to do Viking funerals. And I actually misunderstood Viking funerals for a very long time. I thought it was just all universal. They shoot the arrow on the longboat, light it on fire. But there's so much more to it than that. So there is actually a small round circles of bread that they bake for the sole purpose of being burned and buried with the Viking. The bread was made in many different ways and was intended to be a snack on their way to Valhalla. You guys think you would want some snacks on your way to the afterlife?
Well, if you're going to Valhalla, you're going to be fighting forever, kind of
Yeah.
like AEW, and so you'll need to you'll need a snack. You're going to need a snack
Yeah.
if you're going to eat, and
Yeah.
you know, if you're going to fight forever with Kenny Omega, then you need to have your snacks.
Rob, would you need a snack?
I probably wouldn't need to do this show anymore, to be honest with you. That'd probably be how I would work that. I mean, yeah, but who knows? In Valhalla, are you actually burning calories?
Ooh,
Is your
interesting
body
thought.
able to burn calories. And what kind of
Interesting
snacks
thought.
do you get to choose from? Do I get
Bread.
vending machine snacks?
Nope, just bread.
Like if I go to the afterlife and I see a vending machine full of Doritos, I'm gonna be a little mad because I thought we could do better. So.
All right, so continuing from there. Most of the bread was a combination of really finely ground up barley, oat, wheat, rye, and even ground up peas, usually with some sort of seed, such as flaxseed, baked into the bread as well. They would often bake the bread with milk, though sometimes they would even bake the bread with blood, because it was an excellent way to preserve the blood. These breads were often found with a hole through the center and attached to metal circular key rings made from iron. So not only do they got iron blood, but then they got little iron key rings for the bread. Forget a keychain. Give me a bread chain. No bread chains. Okay.
It's getting late. I'm gonna have to go soon.
Okay, I'll continue. Some theories archaeologists have had as to why they have been on these rings is perhaps if they were hung on a rope, and that was how they were stored during daily life. The typical Hollywood Viking funeral that we know about, where they pushed the small ship out to sea and lit it ablaze with a flaming arrow, highly unlikely because it was can't talk. It was highly unlikely to have been a common practice because the water would have extinguished the flames before everything was properly burned. Although archaeologists did find some remains like this buried with longboats and many treasures, including one buried with a bucket and a small brass of a man sitting in a position similar to that of meditation, earning it the nickname the Buddha bucket. That's pretty cool. Rob, would you use a Buddha bucket?
Nope, you're not setting me up for this one. I don't even. The one thing, though, I will say that interests me is the fact that they found giants buried with things similar to that. Not the Buddha bucket. That sounds like something on TV that one of those guys, the ShamWow guy, get your Buddha bucket now. Tired of waste in your driveway? I'm so tired of all this waste in my driveway. Get a Buddha bucket. Make it look as clean as the Buddha. But they've found the giants, listen, the only reason you want a bread wallet is so you can get to that dough. I get it. No, I just find it interesting that they find these funerary artifacts. Well, funerary is kind of tough sometimes. Funerary artifacts in these mounds, just like they found them in Viking funerals. So you got to wonder if culture transcended, all that jazz.
And Spider, what about you? Any ideas what it was used for? We don't actually know.
Depending on what they thought the person was going to be doing in the afterlife, maybe they thought they were going to be doing the same kind of things that they did in life. So maybe they thought, well, the spirit's going to have to get up and take a poop or something.
Bathroom.
I mean,
No.
You don't know. But some of this stuff dates back a lot farther. We found Neanderthal burials with various goods and things scattered around them and placed with them because they thought, hey, you might need these wherever you're going afterwards, or these were the things that you liked in life, so here you go. We're leaving them with you. And so Viking culture, while not being a direct descendant of Neanderthal and other previous prehistorical cultures, it did preserve a lot of the living in the wilderness kind of aesthetic that you get from a lot of those things. It was the barbarian culture kind of it came from those prehistorical roots, right. And they preserved it and kept it in memory as they went forward. So while we might not understand what some of the things are meant to be, maybe they didn't either. Maybe it was just a memory, a cultural memory from those who came before them that was preserved during that time. And you might not know why you do a certain thing, but it was something important. And we're going to keep doing it because the people before us thought it was important. And if we leave it out, something bad might happen.
I think too it would depend on whatever god you revered most. Since there were so many gods in the Norse
Mhm.
pantheon, I think you would, if you're gonna, want to be buried, you want to be buried in a way that will give praise to your god. Whether that be Thor, whether that be Odin, whoever. I have to wonder,
Well,
some of those Viking funerals were made more so that you would go to that god, so that in Valhalla you would have that god be on that god's side fighting.
Ah,
That's just, whatever my 2 cents.
I
Sorry
like
to
it.
interrupt you, by the way. I apologize.
well, I was at the end there, I
Oh.
think.
Yeah, I'm at the end too.
Okay. All right. So these fancy longship burials were more rare than common because you had to be pretty important to get one of these burials. Even some high-ranking soldiers were only buried with their sword and their shield, and that was it. A third variation, some Viking members were even buried without treasures, but they were buried with a longship. However, it was made from stones. Interesting. Kind of reminds me of
Symbolic.
yeah, it
Yeah,
reminds me
symbolic.
of the Georgia Guidestones and stuff like that. Any ideas on those?
It's like
You think?
certain Egyptian nobles were buried with the big
Yeah.
boats,
Yeah.
because they believed you're going to take this boat and you're going to ride on the river of the stars, basically, and that's how you're going to get to one
Yeah.
part of the afterlife. And so it's a very similar, another cultural connection, again, that probably came from previous cultures and was disseminated among a lot of different groups of people that spread out among different parts of the world, is that you need wherever you're going after you're gone, you need a boat to get there, which
Yeah.
is a very, very interesting idea, but it leads far too many directions for me to try to dig into it right now. But it's just something to keep in mind for people looking into this kind of stuff. Wherever you're going after you're done, you need a boat to get there.
And you would probably be looked at as having some importance in the afterlife if you had your own boat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because what it reminds me of is like Stonehenge and the Georgia Guidestones, and I'm wondering if maybe those were intended to be some sort of like grave marker or burial site, maybe. Did we ever figure out what those were for?
No,
They didn't find any
no, they didn't
buried
find
remains,
they
so
didn't find the progenitors of those. So
Yeah, so that would be something interesting. Now, I know this is going to sound like a made-up name, but this is the information that I got from a YouTube video called "What Was a Viking Funeral Really Like?" But it says Snorri, Snorri Sturluson,
sounds like a
Sturluson,
Viking.
wrote a book in which he claimed to describe several funeral practices of the Nordic people, such as how people needed to have their toenails and fingernails cut to prevent a ship from being constructed from their nails to ferry monsters to fight at Ragnarok. Now that's the thing. That's the thing that I read yeah, that's the thing I got in my sources. There
A quick comment on that, considering that that's another thing that's actually common in voodoo as well, is making sure that you don't let your fingernails and hair follicles and whatnot get separated from your body when you're gone, because they believed that evil spirits or people with evil on their minds could use those to access your body, because it was like your blood, it was like your fluids, anything that was connected to your life source could then be used to influence you either while you were alive or after you were gone. So that's another interesting connection, again, that don't let samples of your body get into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting way of wording it, but I like how you put it back into voodoo, because it does kind of sound like voodoo the way you word it like that.
Mm.
Now, one of the comments over here, nobody really said, didn't Vikings do funeral pyres too, though? So I just looked that up, and according to the Google AI, Viking funeral pyres were a significant part of traditional Viking funeral rituals, often used to cremate the deceased and their belongings. The pyre was frequently constructed to resemble a ship, symbolizing the deceased's journey to the afterlife. The smoke rising from the pyre was believed to guide the soul to Valhalla, and after the cremation, the ashes were collected and often placed in an urn or buried in a burial mound. So thank you for mentioning that, Nobody Really. That's a good one. And back to this one. There was a person by the name of Ibn Fadlan who wrote another book about a Viking funeral, but it's important to remember that he was foreign and quite possibly didn't understand what was going on. But he says,
foreigners.
yep, he says after the death of a wealthy chieftain, they placed him in his grave, which they covered with a roof and left him there for 10 days. They gather his fortune and divide it into 3 parts amongst his household, the making of his funeral clothes, and the alcohol that they will drink on the day that his slave girl is burned with her master and is no more. They supposedly burn the bodies so that they may enter paradise without delay. And that is the last part I have for Viking funerals. So would either one of you like to add anything else?
No.
The number of days is significant because it's supposed to match the number of days that Odin hung on the tree of I think it was Yggdrasil. I think he hung on the tree to gain godhood by getting the various charms and things, because while he hung there, the various spirits and gods and deities visited him to ask him to give up, basically, and every time he said no, they would gift him with a charm of some kind. That's how he was able to know what secrets lurked in the hearts of men, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Go ahead.
It's also,
No,
just
you wanna
real quick to note, Ibn Khalid is actually the main character that played by Antonio Banderas in the 13th Warrior, the Michael Crichton book. So that's
Eaters
interesting.
of the Dead.
That is
Yeah,
pretty
Eaters of the Dead.
interesting.
Because Vikings would let pretty much anybody in their group if they weren't, you know.
Ah. Now, about Odin being on the tree, go ahead, Spider. I know you want to mention it.
Which part? Because I think
American
I covered it,
Gods?
didn't I? Oh, well, yeah, they do have it in there, and they have the character. The character Shadow does hang on the tree, similar to Odin.
I thought that was a really good part.
But yeah, it's a common part of the mythology, and while they didn't hang somebody from a tree in funeral things with the Vikings because they didn't want scavengers to attack them, they did simulate the time span by letting the body rest in repose for a certain amount of time.
All right, so moving on to burial at sea now. Historically, ships out at sea simply had no room to keep their fallen sailors, which is why the burial at sea first became a thing. The last time we had a massive burial at sea was during World War II, and many service people today still choose to opt for this type of burial because it is an honorable and dignified way to thank servicemen and women for what they have sacrificed for their country. Do either one of you know anyone that has ever gotten a burial at sea?
I do not.
Me neither.
Better? A certain guy with the name of Bin Laden got a burial at sea, if I remember
Supposedly.
correctly. Supposedly.
Wow.
Supposedly.
But that's the most we're going to talk about that, because that's a whole other...
All right. I'll keep going then. So an aircraft was once used as a casket. The U.S. government played the Soviet national anthem during one burial at sea and kept it secret for 36 years. Most military families choose to cremate the body prior to the ceremony, but made an exception when burying Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, at sea. And someone was even buried underwater at Pearl Harbor. The U.S. Navy performs about 1,500 burials at sea each year with cremated remains, and only about 15 in a casket. So we're going to get into why that is so rare here next. It could be anywhere between 12 to 18 months before the remains of their loved ones could make it into the water. Burial service is free, but the family does have to pay for the transportation and storage of the remains in the meantime. And since the cost of a freezer for over a year is costly, that's why many choose to cremate the remains while waiting for their turn. What do you guys think about that part so far? Do you think it's fair that they have to pay for the transportation and the storage?
I mean, that's tough because there's only so many storage units that could be had. I don't know. I think your funeral should be free.
Yeah,
100%.
I
burial at sea.
Because it is like a service member. Sorry.
I think it just depends on how elaborate it's supposed to be. I mean, if you're just, hey, you know what? They passed. They passed in service to whatever the government is. You might as well take care of them. If they have certain wishes that they want fulfilled with it, then sure, maybe toss a few bucks if you want
Yeah.
better service with the mourners and everything on the deck of the battleship. But the way that we do things, it takes a lot more money to get one of those ships out to find a spot than it does back when they had wooden ships and things where you just had the manpower. Now you got to pay for all the fuel and you got to do all that other kind of stuff. So I get it. Even funerals are subject to inflation, apparently, over the decades. So
Yeah. So they will notify the family of the date, time, longitude, and latitude of the committal service and give them a handwritten letter from the captain, along with any videos or pictures will be provided to the next of kin. If a flag has been provided by the family, it would also be returned during this time. Sometimes 3 shell casings from the 3-volley salute would also be given to the family, though this may vary from ship to ship. I got like 10 shell casings. The family could be waiting for months for the return of all these items, though, as the ship first has to return from deployment. So that's a bit of a tricky situation. It didn't tell me, but I'm guessing they probably have to wait until the normal deployment. I'm guessing they probably wouldn't just send them back in the middle of their shift. What do you guys think about that?
Maybe they would. I'm not sure.
Not really. Any idea?
again, it's the expense.
Yeah.
If you know, because again, it takes a lot to get modern.
And Lighthouse
like
is
that
right.
moving.
Funerals are
Yeah.
not cheap, especially that level of funeral. It's not cheap.
Yeah, because they got to pay the service members to go out there and shoot the volleys off and all that, I'm sure. There are some rare exceptions, such as Neil Armstrong, which we mentioned earlier, and he was buried at sea on the USS Philippine Sea on September 14th, 2012. The exception wasn't that he was an astronaut receiving a burial at sea, as he was a U.S. Navy pilot, making him eligible for the ceremony. The exception was that his family was allowed to be present for his burial. His wife, along with the U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander Paul Nagy, committed the ashes of Neil Armstrong to the Atlantic Ocean. Today, most burials at sea are retired or honorably discharged sailors, and is rarely an active service member who will receive the ceremony. And today, if an active service member does pass while on duty, the remains will be stored in a morgue or freezer until they return to shore, often called an ice cream party by mariners. Now, would either one of you care to wager a guess at why they call it an ice cream party before I tell you?
Because the body freezes on its way to get eaten by whales. So the whale gets an ice cream.
Spider?
I think it's just a military speak way of saying that they're transporting it. Basically, I don't think it's meant to be something particularly elaborate.
And Lighthouse Flame said space on a warship is very limited. That is 100% the number one reason why they started the burials at sea. So ideally for submarines, if someone were to pass on board, it would try to surface as soon as possible so the body could be airlifted by helicopter. However, this is not always possible, in which case it could take several days or even weeks before they can be transferred. During this time, they will put the body in a body bag and store it in the freezer with the rest of their food by making room for the body by removing all the ice cream, which is why they call it an ice cream party. Yep.
Because you got to eat the ice cream to make room.
Exactly.
And hey, we got to celebrate our homie's death. Let's just eat ice cream and drink. That's a great recipe.
Best way to do it. During war times, they wouldn't even have enough room to store all the bodies, not to mention what it would have done to crew morale. So they attached weights to the bodies and cloths and had a brief ceremony to send them off into the deep. On November 5th, 1944, a Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bomber, that's a mouthful, landed safely on the deck of aircraft carrier USS Essex.
Grumman.
Grumman? Is that how you pronounce that?
That's how you say that. I know some planes.
Thank you. USS Essex, but the gunner hadn't made it back alive, and the aircraft was hit so badly that the body couldn't be easily removed, and they would normally salvage the aircraft for parts, but this time they received orders not to do so, and instead to bury the 23-year-old Lois Edward Dean inside his airplane. Just going to finish this up real quick, and then I'll let you guys say your piece. They pushed the aircraft into the sea, and he is currently the only known Navy sailor to be intentionally buried at sea, with an airplane acting as a coffin. Today, burial at sea is allowed for active duty members of the uniformed services, retirees and veterans who were honorably discharged, and U.S. civilian personnel of the Military Sealift Command, dependent family members of active duty personnel, and that is all. So, what do you guys think about being buried in an actual aircraft?
No.
No?
I'm dead. I don't care. I'm like Spider,
I mean,
just like I said,
mean,
put my
you
body
don't
up in
care.
the candy shop, pull the string, I say funny things, and the kids get a little scared. Do
You seem
that.
pretty dead set on that.
It's hilarious. It's a hilarious idea.
And Spider?
Yeah, I mean, people do what they want to do. You know, it'll be an artificial reef probably down there as long as it stays put, and so it'll foster the life of other things because your nutrients will become nutrients for other things in the ocean. So, you know, I guess it's helpful in the long term towards the life cycle of everything else.
I was waiting for someone to say something about polluting the world.
I mean, I'm sure they take all the fuel out and stuff first. I
Yeah.
mean, fuel is expensive too. But they do that with ships. Like they'll take old ships that are getting scuttled, and they'll take them out to parts of the ocean, and they'll drop them in a certain, if it's shallow enough, so it'll become an artificial reef, so that the ocean, the coral can grow on it and become something that can create a
Sustain
new
life.
ecosystem,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, people can be mad about it all they want, but it's helpful
Angry.
in the
Yeah.
long term as long as you take out the fuel and all that other kind of stuff.
Very helpful.
All right. You guys ready to move on to the last one?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to finish up tonight with sky burial. The best one of all, right? They always told me to, save the best for last. So, sky burial. This one is a bit different. I actually asked ChatGPT about this one, and it kept deleting my answers, so I had to take screenshots. So the time of death is apparently after a person dies. A lama, who is a Buddhist monk or spiritual teacher, is often called to perform fowa, a ritual intended to help the consciousness of the deceased exit the body and transition into the next life. The body is typically left untouched for up to 3 days to allow the spirit to fully leave. During this time, scriptures such as the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, may be read, and the corpse is often placed in a curled fetal position and wrapped in cloth, symbolizing rebirth. And also, something I got from a video that Rob sent us in the group earlier is it also said that during sky burials, they will check the skull for holes, and if there is a hole in the skull, that means they believe that the spirit has already passed on. Is that right, Rob?
Yeah, that was what I read or got from what he was talking about, because he was one of the practitioners of that. So that's why that was so fascinating to me, because it was somebody that actually does that.
And the video that he sent us earlier is actually talking about a specific place. So I'm going to mention that real quick. Let me find that. It was called the Rikung Monastery, 200 kilometers east of Lhasa Dragon Monastery, and it was founded in the 12th century and is traditionally the main seat of the Koiku sect of Tibetan Buddhism, which I believe Koiku, I think they were one of the main practitioners of Shoko Shinbotsu before it was outlawed in Japan, at least. So anyways, back over here. Transportation to the sky burial site the location was sky burials are performed at designated sites known as dirtro, often on mountaintops or remote plateaus, which are considered spiritually potent. Now, let's stop there real quick. Spider, first, do you have any idea why these are considered spiritually potent? And second, would you like to add anything else so far?
most mountaintops in older prehistoric cultures and for a long time afterwards are considered spiritually important, either because of stories about this is where the divine came down, or because it's closer to the divine, or there's a lot of different reasons for that, or because mountains have certain ecosystems that give life to everything that comes down below them. So it's not an uncommon idea that if you wanted to go to a place that it's spiritually significant and potentially powerful, that you would go to a high place, a mountain or a high hill or something of that nature. It's also part of the mythology that arose around wizards' towers back in medieval Europe. It's that they were tall, they were high up. If you were a person who had a tall at the top of a building, you had more power than the people below. You could look down at everything else. So it's all stemmed from that same idea that mountain peaks were somehow more in tune with certain forces than what came below.
Nice. Rob, anything else to add?
For the sky burial aspect, it's really fascinating, and I know you're going to get into it later, so I won't spoil it for the audience. But just to kind of piggyback off what Spider said, it's a holy place, like the top of the mountain. If we go back to Genesis, when God came down to Moses, he came down on Mount Sinai. Very similar structure here. Mountains are holy places.
And
That's
in the
why there's
Book
a
of
lot of
Enoch.
temples up in mountains. Yes, like the Book of Enoch when the fallen came down on Mount Hermon, like we talked about last week. So, yeah, I think it's fascinating. It's a very interesting part. The only thing that would kind of be rough, I think, is having the body in the house, because they wrapped it in Tibetan cloth and then they put it in the house and then they chant sutras loudly, because what that does is it helps prepare the body and it releases souls from purgatory.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about, because the sutras are very powerful, as we've seen earlier with the self mummification.
Yeah. The Ragyapa, I think, would be a difficult part to deal with.
Oh yeah, I would not want to be that.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm about to get into that
yeah,
next.
go ahead, get into that.
Okay.
Get into that.
So for transport, the body is carried, usually on foot or horseback, by Ragyapas or body breakers. Family members. The family members have to carry the body. So going back to the video that Rob showed us earlier, they bring the body in this particular video. They brought the body of their family member to Sati Mapu, the throne of the Guru Rinpoche, and they believe that if you leave the body under his throne for one night, he will be reborn as a human in his next life. That's when they perform the Fowa ceremony for the transfer of consciousness at the time of death, and the family members are the ones to carry the body. So they carried the body for, let me see, I think I had it on here. I think it was 100 miles. Is that right?
In the video, it's 1 hour. They're
1 hour. Okay.
They're 1
yeah.
hour.
Sorry.
They walk 1 hour because they want to go to a place that not a lot of people will frequent.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like their place, which is why tourists aren't even allowed. You're not allowed to see a sky burial. It's very sacred to them. So, because they feel like if a person is there, it can lead to negative energies, because you don't want the kind of energy that person
you don't know
bringing
those
to
people
the area. Yeah,
necessarily.
exactly.
Okay. So next, and that all happens before dawn, by the way. So, like we said, it's often high in the mountains. Drigong Til Monastery and Larong Gar are two prominent locations for such rituals in Tibet. Transportation is typically done on horseback or via vehicles in modern times. However, the video that Rob showed us earlier, they carried the body themselves. They walked it all the way there. The body is carried by the Ragyapa, as we mentioned a minute ago, and they are specifically trained for this task. Now we're getting into the gruesome bits. For the arrival and ritual setup. Before we go on any further, Rob, Spider, Do you guys think you could handle being a Ragyapa?
Depends for who the person is.
It's usually got to be for like one of your family members. Typically.
I mean, if I was part of that culture, I wouldn't think
it.
about it.
Yeah.
But like now, I mean, if I had to, of course. Like
Yeah.
that's my people. I got to make sure their way to the afterlife is prepared. So yeah, I mean, that's just something you do. You
And
know, you
Spider?
gotta.
Oh, sorry.
That's like
I was a pallbearer at my grandfather's funeral,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that the family does. You don't just hire that out. You just
Definitely
don't get a
not.
crew and be like, hey, my brother's dead. Can you haul him around for us? We don't feel like doing it. You know,
Yeah.
somebody's got to carry the coffin and send him off. And if there's enough people in the family to do it, I mean, a funeral home, I think some of them do have people if you don't have enough people to do it, because those are
Yeah.
heavy. I mean, the box
Yeah.
itself is pretty heavy. I had a hard time because
Yep.
I'm not a super strong guy, and at the time I was a lot younger too.
Even with 6
So
people.
Even
yeah,
with 6
so
people.
I was afraid of dropping it and stumbling. Like
Yeah.
I
Ain't
was
nothing
just
worse
so
than
nervous
dropping a
about
whole
it.
ass casket.
Yeah, I was just like, no, don't. So, you know, it's a thing that people do for other people
Yeah.
who've passed on in your family. Like it's respectful to do it, and because who else is going to do it? Again,
Yeah.
you're not
Right.
just going to go out and, hey,
Die
can you haul
around.
my grandfather up there for me? No, I mean, you know,
You got to do it.
you do it because
You
you're
do
the
for
person
family.
there.
You do for family.
Yep. All right. Now we're getting into the nasty part. So, arrival and ritual setup. At the site, the body is laid on a flat stone platform or prepared ground. Incense is lit and sutras are chanted, creating a sacred atmosphere. The area is quiet except for the ritual sounds. And body dismemberment. This is the most physically intense part of the process, handled exclusively by Ragyapas. They have
Mhm.
sacred status due to the spiritual nature of their task, and they use knives, axes, and mallets to dismember the body into smaller pieces. The bones are broken and the flesh is cut into manageable sizes. Internal organs are removed, mashed, and sometimes mixed with sampa, which is barley flour, and yak butter to make it more palatable for the birds. Large bones are crushed with sledgehammers into powder, sometimes also mixed with sampa. So what do you guys think about this part, Rob?
Sampa is a cultural staple for Tibetans, just so we're clear. Just so it's
Okay.
more integrating the living and the dead. They don't eat the bone dust, okay? People, Sampa is just
That's for the birds.
right. Something I do want to bring out is the fact that during the time that the body sits in the home, the family does nothing. They don't, because they don't want to disturb the energy that is going on there. And also, they use SU smoke, SU smoke. And this will be part of what you're going to get into, but that is how they do that.
And Spider?
It is a job for a very particular kind of person who can handle that kind of stuff, and for one, not have like a physical breakdown, just like, oh gosh, bleh. And for another, just the mental fortitude to just be like, hey, I'm just cutting a person to bits and doing all these things. It's again impressive the type of willpower you can have to look on something and be like, you know what, this is for a good. This is going to again feed the ecosystem. It's going to bring this person respect. It's going to their life is going to flow into the life of these scavengers that are going to come along and take care of it. And if I can help them in any way to make sure that this respect is kept up, then I'm going to do that. And to be able to keep that in your mind all the time and have your mind trained to be like, yeah, this is what it is, without kind of going a little bit off on the side. And, it takes a lot of mental fortitude. So it's, again, very impressive.
And a key thing to note, while they're dissecting the bodies, there's laughing and smiling going on because they don't want any negative energy from mourning or sadness to affect the person's transition to the afterlife. And that's a level of respect because, you know, if you're busy chopping up body parts, man, it's got to have a certain smell to it. You're grounding up organs.
Yeah.
That's got to have a certain smell to it. So you
butcher
have to
feet.
be dedicated to doing this. Dedicated.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not for the squeamish. That's for sure.
And like Spider said, not to mention the mental fortitude to be able to disassociate that or differentiate,
and be able to basically
handle
chop
that.
up family members.
Yeah.
And not go back to town and be kind of nuts and start chopping up your neighbors.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
If they gotta go, you gotta go.
hey, Butcher Pete.
Oh, I love that one. Sorry. Okay,
Yep,
so
whacking and whacking.
every part. So the purpose of this is so every part of the body is meant to be consumed or returned to nature, reflecting the idea of. Okay, I'm assuming it's pronounced Dana, but it just looks like some lady named Dana, Dana.
Yeah,
Or-
it's Donna.
Or generosity, and the belief that the body is an empty vessel once consciousness has departed. Now, here's where we get to the feeding of the vultures. And I actually have a couple of photos for this one. So let me pull that up real quick.
Interesting.
Let's see. Here we go.
Are you going to require like a trigger warning? Is it that kind of photo, or is it just
Oh,
showing the
no.
birds?
Just showing the birds.
Some people might be like, oh no, I got through this whole show and then
Oh, no. That would be very unfortunate. So, okay, I will give you a trigger warning now. There is a bit of a carcass in the second image, but it's like blurred out, and I believe it would be considered censored, in my personal opinion.
Trigger me timbers.
Yeah. So this first one right here is a photo of the vultures at a sky burial site at just waiting for the ritual to start. So the scavenger birds are sacred agents. The Himalayan griffin vultures, enormous birds with wingspans up to 10 feet, are the primary participants. They are seen as dakinis, or sky spirits, and they are seen as agents of transference, helping the soul ascend. Ritual feeding. As the body is broken down, vultures circle above and descend. Ragyapas step aside and let them feed. The goal is for the vultures to consume every trace of the body. If they do, it's seen as a good omen, a sign that the deceased had no karmic burden. And if vultures refuse, it may be interpreted as an ill omen requiring additional prayers or rituals. So I'm going to go to the second picture now. Trigger warning, if you need that sort of stuff, it might be a bit graphic. 3, 2, 1. See, I said it was kind of blurred out. And so if they eat the body, then it's supposed to be good and mean that you were a good person in life and didn't have any bad karma or negative energy. And if the body is not eaten, then that's seen as the birds don't like you. So, Rob, Spider, what do you guys think about that part?
Let them munch down, man. Come on, get some of this good old human grub. I mean, listen, it's a good way to get rid of the body, you know?
Yeah.
Like Lighthouse says, there's not plentiful resources. So you got to do what you got to do. And this is basically giving back to nature in the best way you can, outside of the tree pod, obviously. But
I love it.
I think it's interesting. You know, because they think that the birds take the souls up to the afterlife via the consumption of the flesh from the people. And a lot of the times they wait until the flesh has been picked. That's when they make the old Sampa Sunday for the birds, because they want to get that out of the way. And then any body part that isn't consumed or is left over, they take it and burn it so that life or that being that has left doesn't have any connection to this life whatsoever.
Spider.
it's classic ashes to ashes, dust to dust kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's
Classic.
you came from the earth that sustained you in some fashion. And you're going to go back to it in some way. And if you're going to go back to it, you might as well go back to it in a way that helps it and enriches it
Yeah.
and causes a positive. And
Yeah.
it's, I understand why people would want that. I understand all that kind of thing. Like it is a pretty elaborate process. And it is helpful to the local food chain. But at the same time, too, you got to think the reason that they got to stand there and monitor is because if another predator comes along other than the birds, then they're going to get a taste for meat, and they're
Yep.
going to think, "Oh, this was pretty good. What about those guys standing over there? They look pretty good.
Good
Maybe I
man.
go down to the village and chop on a few of them too." Because predators will do that. That's how life cycles work. They find a new source of protein and they think, you know what, that's pretty good. I want to find more of that. So you got to chase off those while keeping to the birds, because birds generally won't just attack you. Usually, a bird is generally going to, yeah, So there's a lot of practicality involved with it too, as far as it goes. Plus, again, it saves you any remains being left behind, anything left you can just get rid of, and it saves having to set aside land for burial plots and things of that nature, because there's a lot of land set aside for cemeteries. Like you go around just in our area here in Ohio, and there's tons and tons of space set aside for cemeteries.
And really, people are just dying to get in too, so that's why.
So the next photo we have is a photo of monks performing rituals at a sky burial while the birds are feeding on the remains, but you cannot actually see any of the remains in this one. So the next part is
a lot of birds.
Yes.
A lot of verbs.
Like, how do you even find that many?
They find you, brother.
Actually, really though, I wonder how they do that. I wonder if
the
they
smoke. I told you they burn Sioux smoke, and that attracts the birds.
Okay. So the final steps in cleansing. We're almost done. Once vultures have eaten everything, Ragyapas gather any unconsumed fragments and burn or crush them into powder, dispersing them to the wind for ritual purification, as Rob said a minute ago. And then they have 2 more post-ritual ceremonies. Families may sponsor prayers for 49 days, the traditional Bardo period. Now, I got to ask, do either one of you know what a Bardo period is?
I'm afraid I do not.
I don't either, so let's look it up real quick while we're here. So a Bardo period in Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo refers to the transitional state between death and rebirth. It is a period of 49 days where the deceased consciousness, not yet reborn, experiences various phenomenon. The term Bardo also more generally describes any transitional period or intermediate state. Oh, that sounds pretty interesting, actually. So they're able to perform prayers during those 49 days, I suppose. Merit-making acts such as releasing animals, feeding the poor, or offering butter lamps may also be performed. The symbolism and beliefs in this practice is to offer one's body to sustain other beings, is symbolic of the compassion and generosity. Non-attachment, reinforcing the Buddhist tenet that the body is impermanent, and returning to the cycle. The elements of the body are believed to reintegrate into the cosmos. And then we've got one more photo right here. Looks like they are feeding the vultures. And then this is the last one. This is like an ancient, artistic depiction. Well, I don't know that it's ancient, but it reminds me of old hieroglyphics almost. And that is all I have. Anything else from you guys?
I do want to say that it'd be an interesting way to go. And the birds don't eat small animals there. And also, the reason why they do this is in memorial to the Buddha who gave his life for the tigress, the starving tigress. So it's seen as a continuation of the life cycle. giving yourself so that something can live, then it gives itself so something can live, and so on and so forth in a repetitive cycle.
Spider, anything else to add?
Well, that's the essence of Buddhism. Really, it's being in balance with the forces of nature
Yeah.
around you, and not taking too much. And whatever you take, you got to give back. If nature has sustained you, then you got to sustain nature when it's all said and done. So, and it's again, there's just so many different cultures that do variations of these sorts of things that you could spend another hour and a half just talking about the ways people do things with their family and friends who passed on. So
we didn't even get to the sky coffins or the cliff coffins in China. The boat.
Oh,
yeah.
those would be
or
awesome.
the superstitious ones, like the ones in medieval Europe with the anti-vampire coffins and stuff.
Actually, real quick,
Just so
Rob
people couldn't steal the organs.
Since Rob already mentioned it, real quick, that was in Black Myth Wukong.
Nice. I'll be interested to play that at some point.
Okay.
But yes, that's all I got.
All right. Then thank you for coming to hang out with us tonight.
What do we got next week?
Oh, yeah, we got to advertise. I'm not good at advertising.
Well, we got May 8th. We got our boy Spider hitting hard with the birth rituals.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys love the death rituals, you're going to love the birth rituals. And then the week after, I will be going into the afterlife. So the afterlife. Yep. We also
he's not physically going there though.
No. We're also going to. I also want to thank Jack and V for the book. The author is, what is the author's name again, Spider?
It's a writing team known as Evan Essex.
Okay. All right. There it is.
And also a member of that team, because I think that's what you're getting at, was interviewed on my other show, which is available on Spotify. It's called Spider Does Things, the show, and it came out yesterday morning.
Yes.
Anywhere that you listen to a good podcast, you'll be able to listen to the interview I had. It's pretty interesting. We had a pretty far-reaching discussion about AI's effects on culture today.
Ooh, I like it.
So make sure you're listening to it. And as always, tell them, Steven.
Why be boring when you can be uncanny? Thank you. See you next time.